Hello there. Welcome back if you were with us this morning, or if you just joined us. Welcome, of course. For our next session, we have Under the Rainbow, and we have Gillian, Dermot, and Philippa. To hear more about them and their presentation, which is entitled Why Be Out When Everyone Else Is In, I'll pass you over to Gillian.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, everybody. Happy Pride at Work. We are so excited to be here. We have myself, Dermot, and Philippa, who are going to be talking to you about why be out when everyone else is in. Basically, what does this even mean? We're going to talk about LGBT at work, the whole idea of working from home, why inclusion is still so important, and why the theme of LGBTQ plus at work, pride at work, and diversity at work still needs to be at the top of the agendas, despite COVID, despite lockdown, despite working from home, and despite how this is going to change the shape of work potentially forever, with blended working styles going to be the future, where people are going to continue potentially to stay working from home or in a blended style of working from home. So we're very excited. We have a great talk lined up for you. Please do send us any questions or comments. We'll try and get to them throughout our presentation. Failing that, we hope to address them at the end. We're also going to be available for a bit of networking and in the chat, so we'll see your comments at some stage, hopefully. We are on the committee slide, so if you don't catch our details here, do check us out in the booth. We have a little video telling you a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So, Philippa, over to you. If you'd like to bring up the presentation, we'll rock on.
Thank you, Gillian. I'm just waiting for the guys to bring up the presentation. Thank you very much. So, yes, we are. So, Gillian,
I'm going to introduce myself last. So, Philippa, if you'd like to just say hello, and over to you.
Thank you, Gillian. Yeah, so I'm Philippa Ryder. I'm COO of Under the Rainbow. You'll hear a little bit more about my story later on. But basically, I'm a civil servant for almost 40 years at this stage, and a proud member of the LGBTQ community, of course. Dermot.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Gillian. Hi all. I'm delighted to be part of this presentation. Really excited to share our knowledge and work with you all. So I'm Daryn McCarthy. I'm CFO of Under the Rainbow and also a psychotherapist with Under the Rainbow. I used to be an ex-accountant for over 20 years, so I know exactly what it's like to be queer, LGBT plus Q in the working environments. So I'll hand back over to Gillian.
And Gillian Fagan is my name. I worked for nearly 22 years in a corporate environment before leaving it entirely to follow my passion of basically working with people around mental health, well-being, and inclusion. In my corporate world, I was mostly in finance. Enough said on that. In terms of what I do now, I run private practice as a psychotherapist, and I also am CEO of Under the Rainbow, which is founded, it'll be 2 years this summer. So we've hit the ground running. There's huge demand for our services. And I'm also a queer woman. I identify as queer and pansexual, which mean different things to me, and I can explain that later on. So I do feel that LGBT plus inclusion in the workplace is a very key component to good mental health, which is why we're so excited to deliver this presentation. So, Philippa, if you want to flick over the slide there, I'll introduce everybody to our team.
Lovely, so there's our team.
Amazing team of people. We have a couple more people who weren't quite confident enough to display their photos yet. Our team is mostly comprised of a combination of speakers, trainers, and psychotherapists / counsellors. So we work with workplaces and corporate entities to help deliver an overall sense of well-being, inclusion, coming from an intersectional approach. We have a lot of intersectional diversity within our team. The photos don't do it justice. A lot of us come from a background where we've had to battle is a very dramatic word, but where we have had to battle to find our true identities and embrace that and work with the whole concept of becoming one true self for improved mental health. So this is us, and if there's any way we can support or help you, just give us a shout. We'll rock on. So when everybody's at home and there's this sense of and I'll talk about this some more in a bit, invisibility, when you can't see it, you can't be it, right? But the whole idea of why inclusion when working from home is very, very important. Diversity is not going away. In fact, it's still on the increase. And diversity has taken on quite a lot of different meanings, but pretty much it just means a range of different things. So the understanding that each individual is unique, accepting, and can bring potentially a very unique, dynamic, and independent viewpoint into the workplace is one of the very few reasons why diversity needs to be embraced, promoted, and included among all staff. Every single employee needs to be given the opportunity to matter, to count, and to have their voice. So the whole idea of inclusion, equality, basically for us, that means acceptance and safety for everybody. The idea that somebody can be themselves, or at least have the choice to be their true selves at work. I appreciate they mightn't always wish to be so, and I didn't for a long time, and we'll get to our own stories later, but there needs to be an aspect of psychological safety in the workplace. With that, only then can we have really happy and productive workforce, a sense of team, a sense of connectedness, and what I suppose in a workplace is described as our personal network. We spend so much time at work, even when working from home, we spend so much time now online. That connectedness is still so vital. It needs to be important and it needs to matter. At the end of the day, equality should not be negotiable, full stop. And studies have shown that LGBTQ plus employees are happier and more productive than those who, when out, than those who hide their sexual orientation or live in what we call the closet while at work. So the productivity of all staff increases, everybody feels valued, respected, and included. There's this level of mutual acceptance and belonging in the workplace. So in terms of the benefits for the company, they speak for themselves, and anybody who has embraced LGBTQ plus at work can see that. So over to you, Dermot, I think you're next.
I am indeed. Thank you, Gillian. So where does it all start? Well, this is a shout out to all queer LGBT plus Q employees out there who are working in the corporate world or who work in public service as well, that the online world may have given you a safety where you don't need to come out and work, where you can feel safe at home. But we've all been there. We have all been there. All of us identify here, presenting now as part of the queer community. It is nerve-wracking on that journey, starting off, accepting who you are. It can be very lonely. It can be very isolation. You may have a fear, many fears, many anxiety, fear of rejection of your family, fear of rejection of yourself, more importantly, and fear of rejection probably in work as well. You know, this might be a very worrying aspect of your life, that now this may be an opportunity also to have a look and see, this may be an opportunity to accept who you are, identify who you are, and begin the process of accepting who you are and coming out and work. Yes, there is many. Sadly, we'll be talking about in just during this presentation, we have come a long way in Ireland, but sadly there is still a lot of homophobia and transphobia out there. But there is hope. Many corporates, many companies are taking on board the LGBT plus employees and supporting employees. As Julian said, LGBT plus people who are happy in work are very productive in work. Myself, I'll explain my story later on, actually very shortly. But it all starts with yourself. So this is a call out for people who are at home, who are listening to this. Start the process of accepting who you are. Start the process of accepting being queer. Start the process of accepting of being LGBT+. You can do it. We've all done it. So next slide, please, Philippa, and I will share you my story. I will be first sharing my story, and Philippa and Jillian will be sharing theirs. So first of all, I will start with myself. I identify as a gay man, and I'm a proud gay man to say that now, because I'm now looking back When I was 14 years of age, that was earlier, when I was 3, I knew I was gay. That was through a lot of process in personal therapy. I found it out, and I do realize that now, working with a lot of people and doing more studies on the subject, that a lot of us who identify as LGBTQ identify early and at the 3. So, but back to my story. My story was when I was 14 years of age. I remember to this day, I was terrified. Terrified. I knew it come to a conclusion that I needed to do something. But back then, Ireland was a different place, a very, very different place. You could not be really gay. You could not come out. It was illegal to be gay. And unfortunately, I was being told that to be gay, this is my interpretation, from certain hierarchy out there, i.e. the Catholic Church, that you are immoral and that you're going to go to hell. Another thing was that I picked up that I'm going to get a HIV and I'm going to die. And another thing that I'm going to have a lonely, isolated life. This was at 14, so you can imagine what I was going through. But I had the inner strength to identify who I was and continue on. It did come to fruition, let's say, when I was 20, when I accepted who I was and I said, I need to do something about this because my mental health was deteriorating. I remember when I got to GCN and I looked at an ad to bring back fun memories, I must say, and they said there was an Icebreakers group. And I said, I am going back to Dublin because I was working in the country in Clonmel, actually. And I said that day when I saw that ad, I said, I'm going up to Dublin. I'm going to this group. It's a group for young gay men who are coming out to accept who they are, who help them on the process of being who they are. Lo and behold, I got a call that day. Fate had intervened. I got a call from Dublin, my good friend, who also is gay. And he said, are you coming up to Dublin? I said, yes, I am. When I came up to Dublin that over the weekend, I met him and he said, I'm gay too. And we both shared a mutual story about coming out, the frustration we had. I told him about Icebreakers and I started on that journey knowing that he was there in my background. So I went to that group and I started the process. I really have now fully embraced who I am. I did have a knockback in my career about the last recession, and I did suffer from depression because I lost my job, and it took me a year to get another one. But I sought help, I sought personal therapy, and voila, here I am. I have accepted who I am fully. I'm a proud gay man, and like my two colleagues, Gillian and Philippa, we have accepted who we are, and we empower people to be their true selves. So through personal therapy, the therapy we provide, and also the corporate workshops that we provide, we're helping many people accept who they are. We're helping many corporates help their LGBT plus employees. So I get passionate about my story, as you can see, but we will see the passion coming out from my two colleagues. So Gillian, I would like you to share your story.
I genuinely had never met anybody like me, and I was so ashamed growing up of telling people what I liked because I liked everything. Now, please don't be under any illusions what that means. That's why for me, queer and pansexual, which are my sexual orientations, mean different things. I would describe myself as a pansexual woman, which means that I like people irrespective of their gender expression, gender identity, or their genitals. So I like what I like and I like who I like. And because of that, I didn't know the word pansexual until I was in my 30s. I'm in my 40s now. All through my teens and my 20s, I thought, I don't just like men, but I don't just like women, and I don't just like both men and women. And I always saw gender as something beyond these two options. And I guess because of that, I had a lot of friends who would have identified outside the binary, outside the male and the female that I guess society tells us that we fit into. So I've had some very amazing relationships and connections through my life. Right now, I'm married to a man, which a lot of people were surprised at, probably mostly me. But I've also experienced other types of relationships. And I hated that question on a Monday morning when I went into work about what did you get up to at the weekend? How could I say to a manager and I worked in finance, but at one particular stage it was a legal team. How could I say, well, on Friday I went out with this partner, but then on Saturday I went out with this different partner, because at certain stages in my life, I would have even practiced consensual non-monogamy. So there's a whole load of things in of itself, and this is not that kind of workshop. But the whole idea around orientation, what that means, there's an assumption in work of the heteronormative. And I hated this. Any boyfriends yet? Oh, you're in your late 20s. When are you getting hitched? The pressure that put on me to conform and to tell somebody, well, actually, I'm dating a trans person at the moment, and then have to explain, educate, and justify. To be honest, it was easier to lie. But then the more I lied, the further I felt so disconnected from myself. I then questioned this. I said, am I ashamed of myself or ashamed of my partner? What's going on here? And when I went to therapy, at that time, the therapist hadn't a clue what I was talking about. And I ended up pretty much training my therapist. That was 14 years ago, and I've been in and out of therapy since. I eventually met my tribe. And I have to be honest, and they may be on the call, and I don't necessarily want to name the company, but I think credit where it's due. I've worked in a lot of different corporate backgrounds, and I'm not going to name them all, but I'll name the one that helped transform me in terms of owning who I was. I worked for Irish Life, and Irish Life had a fantastic float and representation at Pride at Work. Irish Life, for the first time after many years, started getting involved in the Pride scene and having representation in work. So this photograph of me here, I went into work very early one morning and I decorated my desk. As you can see, I had stickers and decals on the window as well. It goes beyond just a few flags. So when everyone started arriving in work, that was me coming out in a very soft and subtle way, probably in my early to mid 30s. And people just said, "Oh," and I said, "It's Pride Day. This is me." And I had the pansexual flag attached to the back of my chair, and it sparked a lot of really cool conversations. It was the first time ever I felt proud in the workplace rather than this shame and secrecy and hidden lifestyle. And it connected me with an amazing group of people outside of my team that I never would have met or spoken to or had coffee with otherwise. So I met people who were my tribe. And I some of you might be rolling your eyes at that term, but it means a lot when you feel that you don't fit in with society to then meet other people who also don't fit in with society. And then all of a sudden you form this micro society yourselves where you get this validation. It's incredibly healing and it's incredibly empowering. And that's now what we do professionally for a living. We help companies make this a normal micro society within the workplace in an intersectional way. Philippa's story is, if you think Dermot and I have a story, Philippa's story is something else. So Philippa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gillian. That's quite a lead in. Yes, I have a number of different tribes. I like the word tribe because I think you do eventually find your tribes, or maybe you find some tribes and then move on to different tribes or whatever. But anyway, that's getting into semantics. Basically, what you see on the screen on the right hand side is me at a very important moment for me, because it was me presenting at the my civil service organisation. I work for the Property Registration Authority. I've worked there for 40 years, actually 40 years next week sometime, right? So I've worked up the pension. I can retire and everything. Not that I intend retiring anytime soon. Well, not too soon anyway. But back in 2016, they introduced a series of unconscious bias workshops. And around that time, I suggested that we set up a diversity program. It was the first, although some other departments argue, but I'm claiming that we were the first in the public service to have a diversity network, diversity program. That helped me to help others, which is my core motto. I want to help others. I want to show people what is possible. But when I started in the civil service in 1980, Ireland was a very different place. I had barely come out to myself. The following year, I came out to my now wife, Helen, who a lot of the audience probably know because the two of us are fairly prominent in telling our story, in trying to help others to try and show what's possible. But in 1980, I was going in a suit and tie into the civil service, and keeping my head down, trying not to be different, trying to fit into that box that everybody's talking about, wanting to come out of. So I found it extremely difficult, and it was only 20 years after that I really started to push the boundaries, and to come to terms with who I was, and with who I am, with the help of Helen, my wife, and with the help of an online community, because we are talking about working from home here. So a lot of people will feel the need to come out to somebody or to get advice. And back in back in 2000, the internet was kind of not brilliant at the time, but there were chat rooms, and there was some information online and so on. I mean, Google wasn't even founded at that stage, so you couldn't exactly do a Google search, but you could find stuff online, and that's how I did. And I really started to come out, uh, originally online first, going into chat rooms, then eventually building up the courage to go out and meet other trans people, and from then move on forward. But I think it is so important that number one, you have to come out to yourself first, and that can take a lot of soul searching, a lot of anguish, and a lot of worry. Of course, as a trans woman, you've also got a sexual orientation, so that can be an added um, issue within the mix of who you are. So there's a lot to consider as a trans woman, your gender identity and your sexual orientation. Um, I'll talk a little bit more about my amazing diversity network within the Property Registration Authority, in a couple of slides further on. But I'm going to pass over to Gillian now as we move on to Dermot, I should say, and on to the next slide.
Thank you, Philippa. I always love listening to my colleagues' stories. I always get something empowering by it, listening to it. How wonderful to work with two fantastic individuals. And we really have found a niche, and we really want to share this with many people listening to it online. So this is a personal message to the employees out there. We will be talking to the corporates later on in the presentation, but this is to the employees out there who are now working online. As I said earlier, yeah, it's a safe location working at home now for some people. I've worked with some clients, and they do find it's a safe way of keeping their identity to themselves. But they know when we all, please God, this vaccine is on its way, and we'll be all partying again, please God, in June, who knows. But we will be all basically going back to the real world, let's say. So they're looking at ways of what can they do now? They've accepted who they are, and now they're on the process of coming out and work. So there's ways of doing it, and then my own personal experience I will share with all of you is that when you accept who you are, you start that process. But you're going into work again, so you're safe in the online world, but you're about to go into work. Let's say you call back into the office. Start doing your research. Does the company that you work for have excellent HR policies protecting you as an LGBTQ plus individual? What are your colleagues like? Are they very okay with you being gay, for example? Would they support you? I remember a time when I was working in a very, heteronormative, I don't like using labels, but I'll use it now. And I remember the so-called slagging that was going on. Not appropriate. But it was really great for me to turn to my colleagues, and two of us would roll our eyes up to heaven and go, oh, there they go again. So you have that support in work, because people are not aware of microaggressions, the smallest little things that can be really damaging. Like somebody degraded the way I talk and thought it was really funny. No, it's not. That's very micro. It's really very homophobic. And they need to be talked about this. The company needs to have policies in place to protect you. So if you are on that process, you've accepted who you are, you want to come out and work, make sure there's proper policies in place. Make sure you've got great colleagues that support you, in this coming out process, that will help you. Because I remember hiding who I was. It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And imagine when you're going out, which I connect with people out there who maybe, now this is not shaming people who are in the closet, so to speak. It is bloody brave to come out. And when you do, it'd be immensely invigorating for you. But it is awfully exhausting to hide yourself and work. Awfully exhausting. So when you come out of work and you feel safe and secure, your productivity will increase. Your joy in going to work will increase. I remember when I came out to my colleagues, my God, it was a good experience, I must say, but it was absolutely fantastic for me as an individual, because it made me fully connect to who I was, made me proud of who I was, and made me really, really engage in the work. I always felt I was on the outside of the team, but it made me really helpful made me really connect with himself and helped me to connect with my team, and made me be more productive with my team. And I was the accountant back then. But this is a shout out to you all, because I did a course about 2 years ago, and I thought it would be always great to come out. It would be really wonderful. But it's your choice. If the work environment is not safe, it's your choice to stay in. But if it's your choice to stay in, make sure you might have colleagues that you can help you confide in and help you to be who you are, because then they can support you. Because sadly, there is some organizations, which I'm hearing in my work as a psychotherapist, are not quite there yet, but they're getting there. So to sum it up, you can do it. If you are going to come out and work, make sure there is policies in place that support you. Make sure you have colleagues that will support you along the way, because when you connect with who you are, it is the most powering thing that you can do for yourself, and will help your career in the process. So on that note, I will pass the presentation on to Gillian.
Thank you. I was coughing earlier and didn't want to disturb you. On that note, if there are not policies in place in your workplace, there are a whole load of anti-discrimination laws. So if there aren't policies in place, you do have the legal right to speak up and still have the right for equality, for representation, and for anti-discrimination. So policies is a starting point. If there are not policies that support you in your coming out, in your transition, in your gender or sexual identity, that's something that perhaps you can instigate in your workplace, or at least have a conversation with somebody who can. Now, on this note, the whole idea of working from home, I am working with quite a number of clients who, because of working from home, have began their transition, because it's easier than having to go into work and be seen and have all of the questions and be going through a process of whether it's being comfortable in their skin regarding a gender expression or sexual expression. The whole idea of working from home implies that there's a safety to that. However, I've also worked with quite a number of corporates, and there's this idea, we'll deal with that down the road when lockdown's over, when we have to come back into work. We'll then look at the whole issues around bathroom policies, for example. But why wait until everyone's back in the workplace? And it's just something that I really think we need to be working on in the background anyway. This idea of just because nobody's in the office does not mean it's an invisible issue. So while, yes, there's this idea of work-life integration while working from home, and I've personally got a lot of mixed feelings on that. I personally prefer the idea of work-life balance especially for people who are not enjoying work or are parking a part of themselves or masking in order to go to work. And this idea of work-life balance implies you can sort of leave your work behind. Whereas the work-life integration, if you are homeschooling and working from home and trying to organize everything in the comfort or discomfort of your own home, there's an assumption that we're flexible, everything is safe, we're all working from the comfort of our own home. The Zoom memes around pajamas on bottom, suit jacket on top, and I swear I'm dressed on the bottom, but I haven't worn heels in a long time. As I'm also an autistic woman, and as an autistic woman, I would have loved the option 10, 20 years ago to work from home or have a blended learning approach. But I'm also a very sociable person. So the whole idea of being in the office, it puts more on the agenda issues like inclusion, intersectionality, psychological safety. And I remember when I was working with a diversity committee with a corporate, they asked, which would you have gone to, Gillian, the LGBT community or committee in work or the disability committee in work? So as an autistic queer woman, it was either or, whereas I thought, well, that's a lot of time commitment for me. I would like a committee that offers minority support or intersectional support. And it's just something for corporates to bear in mind. I'm 100% behind having your LGBTQ committees, 100%, but to bear in mind, what about allowing for intersectionality within that? Whereas working from home takes our eye off the ball in terms of other issues. So we can log on to a Zoom event, maybe for LGBT staff, great. Then we might log on to a different Zoom event. So I just encourage you to challenge yourselves on how you can be a bit more intersectional with your subcommittees. So the whole idea of inclusion versus visibility, it isn't either or. It needs to be both, and not both in terms of invisibility, but both in terms of visibility. And with the option of what the future looks like in terms of work, working from home is going to become, I hate the phrase, the new norm. I hate the phrase. I've kind of got the new abnorm stuck in my head. But this idea of what workplaces are going to look like going forward. Now, at the moment, while we have the offices and Dermot was saying to me this morning, town is very empty. This is the time where we need to start putting policies in place, structures in place, supports in place to be able to allow and invite staff to step forward. This idea of psychological safety is key to all diversity. If somebody does not feel safe to be included, then something's wrong. So it's about the invitation to step forward, to take space and what that might look like. And that might mean also having conversations with certain people about stepping back, but allowing for the space, the safe space. And now is the time to be setting that up in your workplaces. So that's my piece on that. I'm going to hand it over again. Thank you.
Gillian, and it's over to me. So up on the screen, you'll see a few highlights, if you like, for how to support your employees going forward in this difficult time of working from home. I'm going to reference a lot of the work that the Property Registration Authority has done over the past while. Third one down there, webinars. Okay, everybody's pretty much zoomed out, but we were lucky enough to have a diversity month, diversity and inclusion month back in November, where we gave people the opportunity, and indeed Jillian and Dermot both presented to my colleagues, 550 colleagues within the Property Registration Authority in offices around the country. And Jillian talked about the SAD syndrome, and Dermot talked about mental health for men. Yeah, I know it's very difficult. I know people are zoomed out, but it is still a great way to include people. And especially you can keep your camera off, you can keep your sound off. You don't actually have to say who you are when you're logging into the webinars, and it just gives you an opportunity to feel included, because inclusion is so important. Training and awareness, I keep getting emails. I'm getting a bit annoyed actually in work now. We're getting so many online courses to do. Of course, that's something. One of the important things to remember as well, though, is, and even again online, is to have internal role models. I kind of done that by back in 2016, as I mentioned earlier, we set up the diversity program within the PRA. And I put myself forward to lead that because I felt that I was confident enough. I had come out to my colleagues about 8 years earlier, legally transitioning in 2009, medically transitioning in 2011. So I'd had quite a few years to be confident, and I felt that I had got great support from my organization. So I felt that I should give something back to the organization and to any LGBTQ community staff members that needed help, needed support. So that was very interesting. It was very exciting because what it allowed people to do was to see that there was somebody there who was well supported and accepted and so on. But it also allowed allies to come on board. And further on in the presentation, we will be talking a little bit more about allies. But basically, it's so important that everybody feels included in the organisation, and to have people who are willing to support their LGBTQ colleagues is really, really important. Of course, with the internet, you can signpost to resources, and again, the PRA has links to all the various organisations LGBT Ireland belong to, TENI, Dublin Pride, quite a few others actually. So that's great. Partnering with experts of access to therapy. Access to therapy, of course, is vital. We'll talk about that later on. I've so many things here that I have to change the slides. I need to use my phone. So 1 second. And I have a different screen as well. So yes, lovely. That's the one that I want. And sorry about this. There's so many screens. Right, so representation, giving your employees a voice. Employer resource groups, well, Gillian talked about that. That's the LGBTQ subcommittees or whatever in work. Dublin City Council, shout out to Martina there. Brilliant group there. Lots of other organisations. Department of Foreign Affairs have ERGs as well. The company role models, I mentioned that as well. Symbols, look, we can all have on our email signatures, even in government organisations. You can have you can have a little pride flag at the end of your email signature. On your letters, there has been no issue within my organisation, and I've seen quite a few other government organisations doing that. So again, it reinforces the community aspect in your communications, and of course using pronouns if you feel that you want to, if you feel comfortable using pronouns on your signatures. That's another thing. And diverse awareness and events. Well, we mentioned about I mentioned earlier about the diversity month that the PRA held, but there's plenty of other events that you can do just to try and include people. And invite guest speakers to talk to the employees about any aspects of LGBTQ, but also the wider diversity areas, because as Julia mentioned earlier on, there's intersectionality is so important. People can be LGBTQ and be members of the BAME movements, or the or quite a autistic or whatever other issues that there may be, or so it's all intersectional, and I think it's so important to just be aware of that, and to have management acknowledge that, and to embrace everybody and to include everybody as time goes on. So with that, I'm just going to move on to the next slide, and it is Dermot.
Thank you, Philippa. I have a passion as a mental health professional in supporting my fellow queer members of my community and helping who they are. People say to me, or I've heard when I was last working in corporate, why is pride needed? now for the queer community. Why is it needed? Sure, haven't they got marriage equality? Haven't they got their own rights? Yes, Ireland has come a long way, and I'm immensely proud as a proud Irish gay man how far my country, our country, Ireland, has come a long way in supporting our rights. But sadly, we have a lot of work to do. Looking at statistics, this is my finance side of things. I come into play, but I found on a series now how shocking these statistics were. A recent LGBT Ireland report showed that compared our young people to a general population all around the world who identify as straight, there's 2 times the level of self-harm, 3 times the level of suicide ideation, and 4 times the level of anxiety and depression. Not only that, our colleague LGBT Ireland did Elder LGBT Ireland. They looked at their health, and staggeringly, 47% of them, of our elder members of our community, they suffered from physical and emotional abuse. Emotional abuse was 47%. Unbelievable. And only recently as well, belonging to regarding this lockdown, we're all in this online world, 93% of our young people are suffering from anxiety and depression. So there is a need, a support still vital out there for our queer mental health. There are a lot of members of our community still suffering because of their identity, they're still suffering from prejudice, still suffering from discrimination. Yes, our country's come a long way, and my God, am I proud, but still, unfortunately, there's a lot of work to be doing, and we're seeing that in our therapy practice that we're seeing. So Philippa, could you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you, Philippa. This is a photograph of our main room in our therapy centre. It is a lovely opening room, and many clients who come to me really enjoy coming because it's very warm and open, and our other 2 rooms equally are very warm and opening. We do face-to-face still, but we do offer online as well. And so there is 2 metre distance. We do abide by the HSE guidelines. Safety for our clients are our top priority. So we do offer service to people out there who are struggling with their queer identity in personal therapy. We've got therapists who are excellent, all have great experience regarding the corporate world, like myself and Gillian, and we are there to help you. Equally, for companies out there, we do tailor-made EP programs. We do corporate training for you, any management who may be, oh my God, I don't really know what's going on in the LGBT plus community. Where can I go? We're there to support you. So we have many possibilities to help both employees and employers, because with our experience both in the corporate world and public sector world, as Philippa and Gillian and I have explained, we are there to support you. Both Gillian and I, as in our therapist roles, have excellent experience, and being both members of the queer community, we know what it's like to be on the outside. We know the hard work that goes into accepting who you are, but by God, do we know when we fully accept who we are, what a great privilege is with who we are, and our life have greatly improved. And in doing that, we are supporting many members of our community who are coming to our doors, accepting who they are and be who they are. So when they go out the doors of us, they are proud of who they are, proud of who they have accomplished, and proud to work for the companies that support them on their journey. So on that note, I'd like to pass on the slide to Gillian.
Irrespective of the committees that you set up in a corporate workplace, I just want to remind you that isolation is still a very key issue for the LGBTQ plus community. It's not just around the safety of coming out and work, or the psychological safety, or the sense of diversity and inclusion programs that you have in place. Bear in mind, and it's just something to consider, many of us are LGBT now, but remember a time where it was not legal to be so. There are still many comments, humor, joke, banter, satire that are anti-LGBT in the media. The media doesn't really, not often, represent the LGBTQ plus community in a positive light, highlighting stories of aggression, abuse, violence, intolerance. So this is still a key issue for us. So even as Dermot said, why pride? It's because the isolation and the impact that has on mental health is still quite massive. So the issue of non-acceptance, rejection, discrimination is just, I cannot tell you how big it is. I remember having a lunchtime discussion in a company I worked in many, many moons ago. And I'm even thinking recently, there's a big media case you all know where somebody came out as gay even though he had a wife and potentially a family. And I remember we had this discussion at a lunchtime conversation. One of my colleagues, and this was not an Irish Life for the record, one of my colleagues said, I would rather, if that were my husband, I'd rather he died. And I remember at the time, I was probably about 24, 25, being so shocked that that was the attitude, the rejection around someone's sexual orientation. And I'm just thinking, even last year, January last year, because I remember the actual day I was in the hairdressers and everyone was gossiping about it. That guy from the TV, morning TV, I can't think of his name, came out just like as gay, even though he had a family and a wife. And I remember even hearing the conversation. I wrote a letter of complaint about the conversation the hairdressers were having because it was well within earshot, and I was having my undercut tended to. But there was no consideration for who's hearing my words, what I'm saying. How offensive is that? I'm rejecting an entire group of people. I'm rejecting an entire community. And people think LGBTQ plus, oh, it's only so many people. A lot more people identify as non-heteronormative than you might think. The whole idea of sexuality being a spectrum and gender being a spectrum. So it's just something to bear in mind that the isolation is still such a crucial component, and you can do something about it by, as I said earlier, having an invitation is a way to start. Being aware that this is something that, if you want staff inclusion, needs to be addressed, because the stats around loneliness, Dermot and I gave a presentation last year on loneliness and the statistics around it. And then the three of us presented actually to South Dublin County Council on isolation in the LGBTQ community. Like, irrespective of your identity, loneliness in terms of your physical health is apparently the same as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. So when you add an extra layer of minority issues on top of that, and this whole sense that's been internalized that something about me is wrong and not accepted here, that's not okay. So I just wanted to throw this in there just to remind you that this is a social issue and one that we can help repair. So now, Philippa, over to you while we talk about following on from isolation, allyship.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gillian. Yeah. Being an ally in work is something that you can do to support your colleagues. And I have found it so beneficial to me that when we set up the PRA's Diversity Committee and we set up a subcommittee for LGBTQ, that straight away we had 2 or 3 people joining that subcommittee who were willing to put their heads above the parapet, who were not part of the LGBTQ community but wanted to support. At that time, it was actually only me. Very quickly afterwards, somebody else came on that was part of the LGBTQ community, and suddenly 2 or 3 or 4 people were on. We've got a limit of 7 people on that subcommittee. So, of which 3 are allies and are just amazing people, willing to work, willing to support in every way. So if you feel, any of the corporates that are watching this talk, if you feel that how best to support your LGBTQ colleagues, well, be an ally. The diversity committees, the LGBT subcommittees, should of course be employee led, but very much promoted by senior management. You do need management buy-in to allow anything to take place, and that involves time off work potentially to attend conferences like Pride at Work, which is so valuable. And last year, within the convention centre, it was such an amazing experience actually, it wasn't even last year, it was the year before. Wow, how time moves on. But it was such an amazing experience for some of my colleagues from the PRA who went along and got to meet other members of the LGBTQ community that and the corporate sector and other government organisations. It was just a great opportunity. These were allies who were willing, as I say, to support and to be there for their colleagues within the PRA. Gillian and indeed myself have mentioned before about intersectionality, and so any diversity programme should be cognizant of all aspects of diversity, include everybody. The awareness training, diversity awareness training, can be done online, and indeed Under the Rainbow does that, has been doing an awful lot last year. I mentioned about pronouns and so on, about on forms, on email signatures. It's very, very easy to do if you're comfortable doing it. Make sure that you use gender neutral language. We have policies being developed in the PRA around ensuring that all our forms are basically gender neutral where appropriate, or at least we're aware of them as time goes on. Dermot mentioned about banter, of course. That's without doubt something that can be so hurtful. On rare occasions, I've heard a little bit of homophobic or transphobic comments. I think the important thing for allies in that instance is to call it out, to say quietly to the person, hey, what you're saying there could in fact hurt somebody. And you don't know who in the canteen, well, back in the day when we did all congregate canteens, but you don't know who in the canteen might be questioning their gender identity or sexual orientation, or they may just be unwilling to come out. So be careful, and I think it's important for both allies and management to ensure that the slagging, the banter is kept respectful, and encourage speak up policy. Exactly. Partner with LGBTQ experts and have representation of every grade and every area on all the committees. Symbols are such a little thing. My desk, I've got a pride flag. I've always got a pride flag. Coincidentally, I've also got a Christmas tree up on my desk because I like Christmas. But it just shows an inclusion, and it shows that, hey, for new members of staff, and we're always getting new members of staff in, so they see the pride flag, and I occasionally see, and coincidentally, I just saw this morning that one of our new members of staff looked me up on LinkedIn. So I'm wondering, are we going to have a new recruit for the LGBT subcommittee? So with that, I'm going to pass over to Gillian and change the slide.
Thanks. So we've pretty much, well, I hope that we have managed to talk to you a bit about the importance of inclusion while working from home. The whole idea of why come out when everyone else is in. It's a topic that we need to keep talking about. It's a very, very important topic. And I roll my eyes when I hear drama for the sake of drama, but it could literally be a matter of life and death. Genuinely. Because what we have learned through our work is acceptance saves lives. So in terms of the benefits to your organization, irrespective of potentially having an inclusive space, you end up with happier employees who feel accepted, want to contribute, and actually care about the organization that they belong to or that they work with. So it's just something to bear in mind. The benefits are endless. We can give you, and in different talks we can give you umpteen statistics around the benefits of diversity and inclusion, around the benefits of treating all staff as equals. to be honest, this shouldn't be negotiable. It should be a given. We're still working in a way where we are trying to make society more inclusive, where we are trying to not have minority issues. But this means education. And the problem with education is not everybody goes and steps forward in terms of educating themselves. And then even within that, there are issues around accessibility to education. So the more that we can reach out and offer and invite people into these spaces, the better. And that filters down right through to the workplace. So the benefits speak for themselves. We're happy to talk to you around the statistics. We've partnered with an amazing organization. Keep an eye on our social media. We've got some very exciting things coming up. But we have partnered with an organization who does a lot of data research and has the statistics over the damage and therefore the benefits of issues like diversity, inclusion, and equality. But if you're not convinced based on everything we've said, your balance sheets will thank you. And if I need to go there, maybe this talk isn't for you, but maybe you're the very people that we need to be speaking to. It has been shown that productivity and turnover does increase when companies embrace an inclusive diversity program. And I know how cynical that may sound, but that's the truth of it. So everybody wins. Dermot.
Thank you, Gillian. Just next slide there, Philippa. So we're nearly there finishing our presentation, but it's over to you now. So I speak to my fellow queer employees, let's say, people who identify as LGBT+ or queer and employees in the workforce. Take this opportunity now to embrace who you are. Take this opportunity to research the company that you're working with. Do they have policies in place? And if you need that support to accept who you are first, kindly reach out to us. For corporates, we have now shown you the experience that we have. We've got vast experience both in the corporate world and the public service. If you are struggling, identifying help with your LGBT+ employees, we can support you with roles, with projects, with training courses regarding diversity and inclusion, as Gillian stated. So, on that note, I would like to pass it on to Gillian to end her presentation.
I hope we've managed to keep your attention. Thank you if you are still here. If you have questions, you're welcome. We invite you to contact us outside of this presentation and have a conversation, or you can pop them into the chat section there and we can answer them. However, this might seem like a bit of a shameless self-promotion, but it isn't just us trying to say, look, we train corporates, look, we have a therapy centre. Follow us on social media because we also do at least one free community event a month. We have a team of trained trainers, coaches, therapists, counsellors, speakers. We have people who are trained in equality, diversity, and come from corporate backgrounds. So the fact that we do hold at least one free community event every month, and it's usually, we call it BIA, belonging, inclusion, acceptance. We hold one at lunchtime and we usually hold an evening one as well. And we've had some very incredibly interesting discussions on a community level where it's basically everybody turning up as equals. The invitation is there to join in or just sit back and listen, because we really want everybody to be their true selves, and we really respect that this means owning your uniqueness, whatever that might look like. So thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of Pride at Work.
Thank you very much to Gillian, Dermot and Philippa from Under the Rainbow. If you want to learn more about their work, you can check out www.undertherainbow.ie, or why not check out their booth in our virtual community centre. There will also be sessions. If you see where the session tab is, you can go in there. There's a coffee and chats function. Right, folks, I think it's about lunchtime now, so we're going to head off, but we will be back in 1 hour. And there will be 2 more sessions to go for the rest of the day. Looking forward to seeing you then.